Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to general knowledge. It's been a long time since I've watched a video from this channel, but I remember I used to do them quite a lot. And this one is interesting maps that teach you about the US. And I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you're going to enjoy. You know how I feel about the map videos. I just enjoy doing them. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see extra reactions of mine. They get blocked on YouTube. Same for my Instagram, my Twitter if you want to follow me on those. But let's just check this out. It's been ages since I've watched the channel.
The other day, I was scrolling on TikTok and I came across this guy who looks at globes like...
Also, if you hear a fan in the background, that's because there's a fan on in the background. It's flipping hot right now and I have no windows open because it's too loud when I have the windows open when I'm recording. So, yeah, I apologize if it's a bit frustrating, but I need it on.
Map globes. From the way that the globe looks, he is able to date when it was made by seeing which countries exist and what they're called. This is a great example of how much we can learn from looking at a map. So we'll be taking about is to combining or a characteristic we can attribute to the state because of it. Starting with the ones on the thumbnail. First, average life expectancy. If we round it up or down, the life expectancy age in the United States ranges between 74 to 81 years. That is a pretty big gap.
That is. I mean, I still think it's quite good, but 74 is quite low.
This means that if you live in California, you are on average likely to live 7 more years than someone who lives in Mississippi. In this map, we can see it all. The darker the green, the higher the life expectancy, and the darker the yellow, orange, or red, the lower. Most states have a reasonably high life expectancy, although only 10 are above 80 years old, with Hawaii being the highest and the only one that's above 81 years. The lowest seems to be Mississippi at 74.91. 9 states are below the 77 years mark in orange or red, and 5 others below the 78 mark in yellow. This means that a state like California or Hawaii has an equivalent life expectancy to the countries of Portugal or the United Kingdom, while Alabama or Louisiana the same life expectancy as
I need to hear that again. I think I just hit the UK and the same life expectancy, but I wasn't listening to what state.
California or Hawaii has an equivalent life expectancy to the countries of Portugal or the United Kingdom.
Wait, the United Kingdom's 81? Oh shit.
While Alabama or Louisiana the same life expectancy as El Salvador or Libya. There aren't many regional trends when it comes to the highest, although the lowest states are all concentrated in the east or southeast region. So why do some states have a higher life expectancy than others? Which are the factors that cause the average age to go up or down? I tried looking this up and the answer is pretty much everything. Almost every single factor you can think of will in some way influence a state's life expectancy. Obviously, there are some main influences like socio-economic status. If you have more money, you perhaps don't deal with as many issues and you're able to afford healthier living conditions. The availability of healthcare in the US also related in part to economic status, but also other things like education or just a lifestyle that people happen to follow there. Who knows, maybe Hawaiians live longer because they get to enjoy more sun and more beach time. And next, the largest minority
to be fair, that's probably a fair point, but you say that and the UK is the same. And there's not much sun in the UK. I mean, right now it's very hot and it's nice weather, and I'm locked inside. But like the UK is just known for not having sun, so there's obviously other factors too. But
states. And you know what? To be precise, let's do it by county. Caucasians are the largest ethnic group in every single US state, and in only 17 states do they not represent over 50% of the population. However, in some very few counties, non-Hispanic whites are technically considered a minority simply because they do not represent over 50% of the population. It might still be 49. For you to get an idea, according to the latest census, the US population countrywide is 60% Caucasian, 18.5% Hispanic, 12% African American, 5% Asian, and less than 1% Native American. You could also divide the Caucasians into different
wonder what the UK looks like as well. Also, it's weird how like Asian will just sort of be in one group because there's so many different. But I guess it's the same for all of like Hispanic as well. Yeah, I guess they're all quite broad. Because Caucasian can be people from all around the world as well, can't it? So yeah, I get actually that does make sense.
Germans, Irish, English, Italian, etc. But the ones which represent the biggest minorities are African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, and Asian Americans. In this map, we can get some pretty interesting pieces of information. First, Asian Americans are the largest minority in very few places. Some that stand out are Seattle, San Jose, Boston, and Honolulu. African Americans are the largest minority in most of the South and East Coast. Despite being very few and only a large group in low population counties, Native Americans are able to be the biggest minority in almost all of Oklahoma, as well as some counties in the very north. This next map is about US state mottos. It's categorized in the language that the motto is in, although here they're all translated to English so we can understand them. California is the only one with a Greek motto, although it's somewhat of an adopted word into every
Eureka.
language. Most states' mottos are...
Wait, isn't Eureka when like you have a thought come to your mind? Is that what it is? Like that's like the light bulb on your head when it like goes when it lights up. Isn't that what Eureka is? I've not heard that word for ages. Yeah, it is. Come on. Mate, my knowledge is coming in clutch.
In English, and the second largest group is Latin. Washington State is the only one in the native Chinook Yagon language. Hawaii's is in Hawaiian, and only 3 states use 3 different languages.
So, I lead, live free or die, freedom of unity, hope, ever upward, forward. So the red ones are English, the blue ones are Latin. It grows as it goes. God and riches.
French in Minnesota, Italian in Maryland, and Spanish in Montana. When it comes to the mottos themselves, some are interesting, some are more simple and kind of boring. Utah's motto being just industry is kind of weird. Minnesota's Star of the North is pretty cool. Alaska's North to the Future as well. And despite being very long, Hawaii also has a great one. Tennessee's motto is agriculture and commerce. And while this isn't agriculture, one of the biggest rural commercial activities in the US is the creation of cattle. The next map shows us the amount of cattle per 1,000 people in each county. The legend is above, and what instantly calls our attention is the fact that in the counties displayed in red, there are more cows than people. Now, many of these are counties with low population, so we don't need many cows to overcome them, but still, many highly populated counties are also able to have more cattle than people. Countrywide, there are 94 million heads of cattle versus 323 million people, so each cow would still have to take down 3.5 humans in order for them to take power. Cattle farming is an industry that consumes
animal farm type stuff, man. What's going on here?
Ridiculous amount of water. The world spends over 12,000 liters of water per kilogram of beef produced. That is a lot. We're always told to save water, and we should, but remember that the biggest spenders are these big industrial companies and not the common people. Although we consume the products that they produce, so it's all connected, but this next map shows us precisely the estimated domestic water usage. Essentially how many gallons of water each person uses per day.
So each person, I was thinking, well, will this show them where like the more of the agricultural places are? Because obviously it will be a lot darker where they are because, like he just said, water is used a lot more for these industries. But he just said, he mentioned humans, didn't he? So it's not going to be based off just in general. It's going to be on like human usage.
Domestic water usage. Essentially how many gallons of water each person uses per day on average. This includes watering lawns, etc. The darker the color, the biggest water usage, but remember this is per capita. The Northeast clearly uses less water, perhaps due to a less hot climate that doesn't demand it as much. But
it's interesting how it's not as much here, to be honest, because it's so hot here. Like in like the southern states, it's so much hotter. Like actually, I say that it's like desert here as well. It's very hot, but this is the hottest part of the US, right? Like these states here are like the hottest part of the US. That's what I always thought. Again, other than like the desert plate, actually, I guess it's hard to judge. I feel like down here it's more like sort of the humidity and the heat is just insane. So the mix together, it probably feels hotter. But then in the desert ones, it's just the heat's just ridiculous. But like, I don't know if the humidity will be as high. I don't actually know if what I'm saying even makes sense. But I'm surprised it's not as much here. But again, maybe there's a lot more rain here as well. Don't know.
Again, the highest value here is 225 gallons per day. Most of these maps need to take into account each state or each county's population because some have significantly more people than others, and that should impact the way we analyze the information displayed. The next map is about population itself and presents us with the percentage change in population per county. So from 2010 to 2020, how much population did each county gain? The counties in brown are the ones which lost population, although this map doesn't specify how much. In yellow or blank are counties that grew up to 5% in the past 10 years, and then the darker the green or blue, the biggest the population growth, up to 20% or more for the darkest shade. We need to remember though that if a county has 100 people and it grows to 130, then it grew 30% just by gaining 30 people. While if a county has 100,000 people and grows to 120, it just grew 20%. The percentage might be smaller, but the value itself is higher.
So basically,
these
you're looking
maps
for
are a little misleading.
Where the where the big cities are and seeing if it's like green or what, and that's when it's like a true change.
This perhaps justifies the fact that we don't see that high of a percentage growth on the coasts, the highest populated areas in the country, while we see 20% and over increases in many of the Midwest and northern counties. However, there are some exceptions in Texas and the East Coast, especially Florida, where high population areas also show high percentage increases. So far, we've been looking at a US map divided between states or counties, but what if the country was divided in another way? Many of the lines dividing these regions are artificial. They resulted of some treaty or agreement, but mostly decided by a group of men with a map, a ruler, and a pen. What if this hadn't been the case, and the internal borders of the US were based not on these fictional lines, but on the natural barriers of the land? These would include mostly, if not exclusively, rivers, lakes, and mountains and valleys. In this hypothetical map made by the Atlas Pro, the continental US would be divided not into 50 but into 28 separate states. And honestly, they look pretty good. That forsaken part of Michigan that is in the Wisconsin Peninsula is gone for that reason alone. I think this is a valid hypothesis. When we overlap this division map with a map that contains the rivers of the US or one that contains the mountainous regions, we can understand why these divisions are where they are. And while this will obviously never happen, it does sound like more of a logical division. Does anyone know why state borders are the way they are? If you don't, I can make a video about it because I honestly don't know either. The next map is about megaregions. But what is a megaregion? In the US, megaregions are cluster networks of cities, similarly to what happens in Japan with their megalopolis or the Taiyo belt, which connects various cities. It's literally that. Urban centers that are so big that they end up connecting with each other. In the
Really? What the fuck? So you've got Washington and Baltimore. That's the main one that I know about.
West, there are 11 according to this map, and they are estimated to contain a total population of over 237 million people. About 2/3 of the entire country lives in these 11 areas. In fact, some of the mega regions are so large that they're beginning to connect with each other.
Like, how is this a mega region? They're so far from each other. Like, this doesn't really make sense. Like, these ones being that makes sense. But why is this one connected? This one's closer to here. But I guess there's just so many like civilized places along this area that maybe it just connects them, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's how it would be. But yeah, look at how big some of these are. Look at this one here.
Like North and South California, Piedmont Atlantic, the Northeast and the Great Lakes, and the Texas Triangle and the Gulf Coast already have. This is mostly due to population concentration in cities rather than the countryside.
See, I'm sure London... sorry, not London, the UK and England would just be completely coloured up, to be honest, because it's so small and the amount of cities that are here, it would just all be connected.
Who lives in cities? People. What do people sometimes follow? Religions. Was this a forced transition? Yes. The next map shows us the percentage of people following the Jewish faith by each US state, and I was surprised by how low it is. The highest value is just over 7%, and that's only found in the state of New York. The cluster of states around it on the East Coast have percentages between 3 and 7. Florida and California range between 3 and 5, and then only a handful of other states have between 2 to 3% of their population being Jewish, with the vast majority being 0 or at most 1. And in contrast, we can look at Christianity, this time by county. This map doesn't present us with the values or percentage of people that are Christian. Instead, it presents us with a division between Protestantism, Catholicism, and Mormonism, and allows us to see which areas of the US have a prevalence of one of these 3 types of Christianity. Only Utah and part of Idaho are Mormon. The vast majority is mostly Protestant, and then we have some areas that are more Catholic, mostly on the upper East Coast, California and southern Louisiana, as well as southern Texas. Nevada and Arizona.
It's interesting how just this area here is so dominated by Mormonism, but then it's nowhere else really in the country. It's so weird how that's just sort of managed to be like that.
Seem to be the states where the 3...
Obviously, it doesn't mean there's not like people who are that like Mormonism as well. Like, it isn't in these states too, but like it's not a dominant one by any means. But here it just is. It's just interesting how it just sort of closes off like that.
Types of Christianity mix the most. You know who's a Catholic country as well? Portugal. And in this other map, we can see the percentage of Portuguese Americans by state. This might actually be why the Upper East Coast has a high level of Catholics. Rhode Island has the largest percentage with 9% of the population being Portuguese. Massachusetts is next with around 5%, and then these states around it as well. On the West Coast, California, Nevada, and Oregon each have up to 1% of the population, and Hawaii surprised me, having at least 3% of its its residents being of Portuguese origin. And finally, a cool map that shows us the oldest building in each state, establishing a key difference between two categories, those who were built by natives and those who were built by colonizers. Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico have the oldest remaining buildings, dating back to around the year 750, built by the ancestral native Pueblo people.
I wonder what the oldest building in the UK is. I don't actually know, I probably should, but
only other two states that have pre-colonial buildings as their oldest are Georgia, the Okmulgee Earth Lodge from 1015, and Hawaii, the Malaeo Eyau from 1200. And what's also interesting is how this map allows us to see which areas were colonized first and last. The East Coast was the earliest, dating back to the 17th century, only Puerto Rico.
1853, what is like the most recent? He's probably going to say, but I think it's 1853. 1855, that's wild, man. That's the first building built there in 1855.
Mexico and Kansas have 16th century buildings as remnants of the Spanish colonial empire. Then comes the West Coast and the area further west of the East Coast, along with Texas, colonized next with buildings from the 18th century. And finally, the middle area of the US and Alaska, which were colonized later, with the oldest buildings being from the 19th century. So, those were some interesting maps about the US that teach us important information about the country and each of its states or counties. And like I said at the beginning,
shout out to this guy, man. I might have to watch this one. I don't know if people will be interested, but again, I like map videos and I think it's quite cool for me to watch. But I like the Portuguese map, a nice little touch. I actually grew up in California near San Francisco, and there were a few Portuguese kids in my high school. There had been a settlement in the North San Francisco Bay Area, and they were descended from that wave of immigration. My editor is like Portuguese American as well, so yeah, it's interesting how like that even came into this video, but I guess it's a lot more of a higher percentage than I realised. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. If you want more map videos, I'm always down to do them, but yeah, suggest what else you want to see, and until next time, subscribe. Until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.